At exactly 6 a.m. on January 18th, 2014, the sun began peeking above the horizon in Luanda, Angola, marking the beginning of what seemed at the time like any ordinary day. Just 7 nautical miles off the coast sat anchored Kerala, a Greek-owned, Liberian-flagged, Angolan-chartered oil tanker. Kerala had just loaded 60,000 metric tons of diesel and was carrying a 27-person crew when something strange happened. The ship suddenly stopped broadcasting a signal. Its owner tried but failed to make contact. As far as any map, satellite, or radar was concerned, Kerala stopped existing. An entire day went by. Nothing. Then another day, and another. Then 5 more. Finally, on Sunday, January 26th, 8 days after its disappearance, the tanker emerged 1,300 miles north off the coast of Nigeria. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. 13,000 tons of oil worth $8 million was missing, 1 crew member injured, and the ship's identification markers painted over. In case there remained any doubt that this was a clear case of piracy, a suspicious tugboat had been sighted nearby. Instead, the plot thickened. Sponsored by Morning Brew, the free daily newsletter that keeps you up to date on the world of tech and business. When you hear the word piracy, you probably think, consciously or otherwise, of Somalia. For a long time, this was the capital of maritime hijackings. At its peak in 2011, 736 crew members and 32 ships were held hostage. Why Somalia? The answer seems obvious. The average person lives just 57 years, and its GDP per capita is the second lowest of any country on Earth. It ranks at the bottom, in fact, of nearly every metric where data is available. But while most of the population lives on less than $1 a day, just a few miles off the coast pass by ships carrying many millions of dollars in cargo. To put things in perspective, Somali pirates collected an estimated $70 million in 2009, which would make it the country's 3rd most lucrative industry, after gold and sheep and goats. The actual cost of piracy, on the other hand, is much larger. It includes not only the ransoms themselves, but also the second-order costs of prevention, insurance, and lost efficiencies. When everything, from hired security to longer alternate routes are factored in, a single hijacking between Europe and Asia increases the overall maritime shipping cost that year by 1.2%. Now, around 2009, the world collectively decided enough was enough. NATO's Operation Ocean Shield was led by the US, but everyone from Norway to Pakistan, China, and even Russia pitched in. It's a strange set of circumstances that gets India and Pakistan, the US and Russia, and China and Japan to fight on the same side, but nobody likes pirates. And, to the surprise of no one, guided missile destroyers and their assortment of Seahawk helicopters were victorious over a few dozen wooden skiffs. Since 2018, thanks to an aggressive military response, both mercenary and naval, no attacks have occurred in the international waters around Somalia. Piracy, it seemed, was becoming a thing of the past. Then, like a game of whack-a-mole, it sprung up somewhere else. This time on the other side of Africa, around the Gulf of Guinea, whose coastline stretches nearly 4,000 miles from Senegal to Angola. Today, a staggering 95% of all global kidnappings occur in these waters. 8 of the 9 ships fired upon in 2015 were traveling through the Gulf of Guinea. In 2017, over a third of all ships passing through the region carried kidnapping and ransom insurance. Although it hasn't yet reached the level of Somalia at its peak, the Niger Delta is becoming the new global piracy hotspot. Half of Nigeria lives in what the UN calls multi-dimensional poverty, which measures both income and other factors like healthcare and education. Wherever there's poverty plus opportunity, it seems, piracy will follow. Yesterday Somalia, today Nigeria, and tomorrow somewhere else. or so it appears on the surface. In reality, what we've come to think of as piracy is more a result of specific circumstances within Somalia than the explanations Hollywood popularized. Piracy in each region is based on entirely different, culturally and economically distinct business models. The central problem facing the country of Somalia is that it's hardly a country at all. Since the collapse of a centralized government in 1991, Somalia has been ruled by regional fiefdoms with varying degrees of law and order. Over the course of one 16-year period, no fewer than 14 failed attempts were made to establish a new national government. The result is that while most of the world recognizes only one sovereign Somali state, there are, in effect, several self-proclaimed independent governments and warlords. One of which, Somaliland, acts in practice like any other nation, issuing its own passports, holding its own elections, and enforcing its own customs. This inability by the central government to project power beyond the capital, combined with droughts and aggravated by insurgents, means that a general lawlessness pervades the region. The resulting unemployment is one of the primary drivers of piracy. Yet, Somalis have simultaneously turned this into a strategic advantage. Anyone, anywhere in the world, armed with an AK-47 and some bravery can attack a ship, most of which really only travel at 20 or 25 miles an hour. The problem is what you do after that. The most valuable cargo on a ship is its crew, from which you can potentially extract anywhere from $700,000 to nearly $10 million in ransoms. But kidnappings are no walk in the park. Fresh-faced pirates are promised action and adventure, but soon discover they're more like small business owners. Just as new franchisees realize all they've done is paid for the right to flip burgers, being a pirate isn't all it's cracked up to be. Most of the job is spent transporting, guarding, and feeding hostages, doing bookkeeping, and above all, patiently waiting. For every one person holding a gun announcing "I'm the captain now," there's at least one more doing the boring grunt work on shore. During the heyday, many coastal communities were based entirely around supporting this industry. The average length of a kidnap for ransom operation is 6 months, and some negotiations drag on for over a year. That's 6 whole months of just waiting, trying not to get caught. But herein lies Somalia's advantage. Its complete and utter lack of formal institutions, a motivated police force, or functioning government means that its pirates can afford to hold hostages as long as necessary without fear of being found out. Then there's West Africa. The region's economic center is Nigeria, by far the most populous country on the continent. Nigeria is an oil giant. Its over 600 fields pump out 2 million barrels of crude oil a day. The industry generates 95% of the country's foreign exchange and 80% of its budgetary revenues. Yet, in a classic case of the resource curse, only about a quarter of its oil is refined domestically. The rest is shipped abroad, refined, and returned in an expensive and inefficient cycle. To avert protest against a system that clearly benefits only faraway corporations and corrupt local politicians, oil imports are heavily subsidized, making its fuel among the cheapest in the world. Corruption, resource dependency, and exploitation mean that despite producing more oil than anywhere else in Africa, Nigerians lack reliable access to electricity, instead spending $9 million a year on fuel for generators. On top of all this, oil importers regularly decide they aren't getting properly compensated, cut off supply, and create shortages around the country. The result is unmet demand for fuel and a pervasive sense of injustice. It's hard to feel constrained by the law when it's abundantly clear that no one, from local administrators to top officials, do either. One way this manifests is illegal makeshift oil refineries. A group of entrepreneurs will set up camp in the swamp, burn crude oil in open-air pits, and sell whatever comes out the other end at gas stations across the country. The other way is known as Petropiracy, an extension of the widespread plunder of oil that occurs in rivers and pipelines across the Niger Delta. Unlike in Somalia, where most pirate attacks are kidnappings, a significant number here are oil seizures targeting tankers. In 2016, pirates stole 400,000 barrels of crude oil every single day in the Gulf of Guinea, for a total loss of $750 million in 2019 alone. Ironically, part of Nigeria's problem is the opposite of Somalia's. Where Somali piracy flourished in the absence of a state, piracy in the Gulf of Guinea is often enabled by it. Put another way, its problem is that it has too strong a formal economy, and not enough lawlessness. Recall the case of Kerala. Logistically, it would have been difficult to hide a ship of that size for months at a time, as was often done around Somalia. On the other hand, some semblance of formal institutions and markets are an asset for Nigerian pirates. There's always an unscrupulous buyer for stolen oil. Petropiracy is sophisticated. For starters, it happens really fast. Sometimes oil is seized and resold in a matter of hours, quickly and untraceably moving between the 20 countries in the Gulf of Guinea. Attacks often require insider information, connections, and planning. Some studies suggest there's a kind of sweet spot between anarchy and order that maximizes opportunity for piracy. After a ransom was successfully paid for MV Victoria, a freighter attacked around Somalia in 2009, for instance, pirates offered to stay on board until it reached safety to ensure it wasn't hijacked by a competing gang. Similarly, when Al-Qaeda tried to set up shop in Somalia during the 90s, it was frustrated by its lack of policing. Self-protection is costly and time-consuming, even for pirates and terrorists. When Kerala was eventually found, the Angolan Navy conducted an investigation. Its verdict: the whole episode was faked, there was no hijacking, and the suspicious tug was instead a replica. What this means is either that someone on the ship itself coordinated the attack, or the Angolan government dismissed evidence of what would be the most southern attack in the Gulf of Guinea at the time, worrying that it would deter shippers and harm the economy. As you can see, the lines between the formal and informal economies and the good and bad guys are blurred, and sometimes even change from one day to the next. The lesson, if there is one, is that stamping out piracy once and for all is nearly impossible. Take the case of Somalia. While it's true that the robust multilateral naval response was indeed effective, it wasn't quite as successful as it may seem. Rather than disappearing overnight, pirates and nearby ships, especially fishing vessels, reached a sort of mutual agreement. Pay us for a fishing license and you won't be disturbed. Nigerians, likewise, conveniently, though at times convincingly, argue that oil companies, who profit from but give very little back to the country, are the real pirates, extracting value from the land for the benefit of few. As long as these fundamental inequalities remain, piracy will only adapt in its outward appearance, moving on land and changing in name. One thing that hasn't changed much is how we get our news. I can spend hours scrolling through Reddit and Twitter and not really remember anything. Today's sponsor, Morning Brew, is a better way to stay up to date on the world of tech, business, and finance. What I like about Morning Brew is that it's self-contained. There's a start and an end, not an infinite scroll. Every issue is interesting, witty, and condensed, so you can feel accomplished, up-to-date, and learn something new in the first 10 minutes of your day. In a recent Morning Brew, for example, I learned that Amazon today has double the number of employees it did at the start of 2020. Amazingly, it also makes more revenue from advertising than YouTube. Click the link on screen or in the description now to sign up for the Morning Brew newsletter 100% completely free and in just 15 seconds. Sign up, give it a try, and thanks again to Morning Brew for sponsoring this video.